This is the answer lady with a very useful tool for KISS loomers, a bias knitted cast-on rag. Let's see how it works.
Recently, some KISS loomers have become interested in cast-on rags. In my Loom Knitters documentaries, there's already a segment on cast-on rags, but let's make one specifically on a KISS loom while we talk about what you need it to do and why it's a help. First of all, for most of the purposes that we use, we want it about 3 inches wide. So on this loom, to make sure I get that, I'm going to cast on 12 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Good. And now we're just going to knit for a minute. But there is something special that we'll do to make it a cast-on rag. While I knit the ordinary stuff, I'll explain to you what it does for us. The most classic version, or reason to use it, is to begin toe-up socks. This gives you something to hang on to, makes it easier to stretch that first row up to finish the sock toe when we have to hang it on the other half of the loom. And the cast-on rag makes it also easier to find your first row of stitches, and we can hang live stitches. Now on this row is where the special method of making one happens. This particular one that I'm showing you is a bias cast-on rag. So we're going to knit this stitch and cast on one more on purpose with the simple cast on, just wrapping around. So we'll knit over all of these in the ordinary way. But on the initial edge, in this case the left edge, but it could be the opposite edge, we are also going to decrease one just by moving this stitch over. And we're increasing one on the right hand edge. So I'll knit back. The goal here is to keep the rag the same width all the time. Now, what we're going to use to hang on the pegs when we use it is the loops that are formed by the simple increase on the right hand edges. People sometimes ask me, well, how long do I do this? How many rows do I need to go? It's very easy to determine, and you may want different amounts for different projects. You'll get one loop every time you increase. So if I need to hang, say, 4 stitches for some reason, whatever it is I might be doing, I need there to be at least 4 loops. If I want to start with 100 stitches, I need there to be 100 loops. I'm going to show you a shortcut for this increase. Just before you finish knitting over the rest of the row, start back on that one peg. Then I don't have to hold on to this tail the way I was. So now we've got 2 increases. And when I get to the other side, I will make 2 decreases by moving this one over again. On the left end, the decreasing end, I am slipping the first stitch just for ease. Remember that slipping in knitting simply means for a loom knitter, we neither wrap it nor knit it. It does get knitted going this direction, right to left as I'm working. And because there was a decrease, we're knitting over 2 loops this pass. It does not matter what your rag looks like at all. It does not matter that it's the same gauge as the knitting you'll be using, except within a range. It should probably be made on the loom you're planning to use. It's best if the rag is somewhat loosely knitted, because you want these loops that turn up on the right to be big enough to hang stitches. We are ready to decrease on this side. I told you something not quite right. When I decrease, I am knitting that stitch. All right. Wrap at this end. That will be our new loop. Knit this over. Start back to lock it down. In truth, it does not matter what the left edge looks like, but we work the decreases to make the rag the same width the entire length of it. I first told you that I was slipping the left-hand edge, but that's not entirely true. That very last stitch doesn't get knitted before I decrease it, but it does get knitted. It just did. Now, let's see if we should decrease, because I've been yakking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Already did it, so I'm good. Now we're on the way back to the left. This knitting is perfectly normal. I'm doing it a little bit loosely, only because it doesn't matter how I do it, and the loose knitting is going to go faster and also be easier for you to see. And this time I'll talk you through my slipping, not slipping issue so I don't confuse you any more than I already have. I am huddled over, peering over the camera, trying to see the stitches. Okay. I'm not going to wrap and knit this stitch right now, but I will lift it and decrease it, and then I will wrap and knit the edge stitch that is composite on the way back to the right. Now, every time that I move to the right, in this case, as I have said but should reiterate, you could work this from right to left and it would make no difference to the project. This last stitch was just a wrap last time. This is the first time it's a real stitch. And now we make one new wrap, increasing, start back, and knit these over. And by now, it should be possible to see the loops forming on the right-hand edge. Let's get this knitted and have a peek. Aha. There, 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 and there. Let's do one or two more to make sure you get the idea. And then while I do that, since you now understand what's going on and you're just watching to cement it in your mind, we'll talk about some other ways that you might be able to use this. I've knitted the whole row. I'm going to decrease on the left and begin wrapping to the right, where I will increase. Now, do you know how on a scarf, if you begin and end with ribbing, it's not so bad because ribbing looks the same from every direction. But even then, you're faced with the fact that sometimes matching the cast on you wanted to use to the bind off you wanted to use, they do look different. Well, this is one way that we can use a cast on rag. If you start by hanging the rag on the pegs, then knit all the way to the other end of the scarf, knit your ribbing or whatever other end treatment you want, and bind off. Let me see, I lost count. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yes, I should be wrapping. You can then hang the first end of your scarf from this cast on rag onto the pegs and knit your ribbing, knit to the end, and bind off. Then both ends will truly match because both of them are bind offs. Both of the ribbings have been knitted in the same direction. There are times when you can even use a cast on rag as a stitch holder. Let's see. I think that we should just finish this one up now. I'm going to knit one more time to the right because I want this last loop to get solidified into something useful, and then we'll bind off. So when you want to hold stitches or keep live stitches, maybe to crochet into them later, or any number of things like that, the cast-on rag can save time. It can also save yarn. If you would use waste yarn for any reason to put stitches on or take them off, you can use your rag instead and do only one row connecting the main yarn and the rag rather than the several rows that you might need. This is not a technique that has been used much in hand knitting. I learned it first as a machine knitter, and it's not in great use as a machine knitter. It was at one time very popular. People don't seem to use it as much now, but it can be very useful. One more thing. Because we are going to be attaching this to main knitting, sometimes with the use of a ravel cord or separating cord, it is very, very helpful if your cast-on rags are simple plain colors, not tweed, for example, not self-patterning yarn. If they're acrylic, and I'll tell you why in a minute, and if they are different colors from the ones that you would normally use for your main knitting. It's easy to see that you want to know that you're picking up the correct stitch. Good heavens, that seam ripper needs to be tossed. It has no abilities. There's my bind off. Here's my bias rag. You can hang it from either direction. The first time we use it, these loops formed by the increases will be nice and loose and easy to find. But in the future, they get easier and easier. Let's go ahead and hang them now. One advantage of the bias knitting is it's stretchy this way. It also rolls less. See the ends angling because of always increasing and decreasing on the same sides? Get this positioned. Okay, loop number 1. Hang it on a peg. Fish around for the second loop. Make sure you don't wrap it around the pins wrong. I'm going to change angles. I think you can see better maybe like this for a minute. There's the second loop. Putting it on the peg. Here's the third loop. It would be okay if it wouldn't stretch far enough to skip a loop and hang the next one, because this isn't part of the knitting really. We're just using it as stitch holders. In fact, in this case, it does fit. Let me see if I can do this with my left hand so I don't get in your way. There we go. Let's turn back around to try this angle again, because you now see where I'm getting the loops from. The edge. Pick it up and put it on. So what you need to decide how many rows to do is to knit double the number of rows of the peg count you plan to use. In other words, if you need 12 pegs, you need 24 rows to get enough of those increased loops to do what I'm doing. And here's our last loop. that's how you hang it. I'm going to stop here, and in our next video we'll actually use this. Here is the cast-on rag in use, and I am going to show you how to do it in the next video. You don't have to guess. But I want to tell you a couple things before we leave the introductory video. First of all, when I got to thinking about it, I'm pretty sure that on one occasion I decreased right after knitting the row going right, rather than waiting till I had gone and knitted left. I did not go back and correct it because it doesn't matter. It would be a slight hitch in here somewhere if we cared to look hard enough, but I personally don't, and as long as you've got enough to hold on to, the looks of your rag do not matter. Second thing that I wanted you to see is I used most of, but not every single one of these loops. And you can do that. If I had 100 loops and only needed 8 stitches, the other 92 would definitely be in the way. But if you've got a rag that's just a few loops longer than you need for your stitches, that is not a problem and not in the way. All right, let's go on and see how to do this.